Hi everybody and welcome back. Hey, today's adventures bring us to new territory, as you guys can see. We're back in the pine trees. We're in Idaho at the time. If you look behind me, pretty beautiful looking, right, with those pine trees if you like this kind of landscape. I do. The mountains, the pine trees, they look awesome, and you might be thinking, wow, pristine. And it does have that look. And while this is definitely beautiful territory here in Idaho, this area that I'm in right now is actually far from pristine. Here in northern Idaho, we're in the area of the Coeur d'Alene mining district. This is one of the biggest mining districts in Idaho. Really, it's one of the biggest silver mining districts in the world. This area produced a heck of a lot of silver, as long as some other associated metals. It was about the late 1800s that someone discovered or thought that they'd found some placer gold opportunities here. The miners kind of moved like schools of fish in those days, where, ooh, there's a new gold or a new mining prospect in this area, so they would just move, you know, and then they had, you know, a new place to go and mine. So they'd basically just pop up a town in this new area, essentially overnight. And that's what happened here. They called it Eagle City. And the gold prospects didn't pan out, pun intended. They didn't pan out as well as they'd hoped. And so the town kind of crumbled as fast as it was put up. So Eagle City didn't really turn into much. But around that same time, maybe a couple years later, somebody found a new metal to extract, and that is silver. So this area is often referred to as Silver Valley for obvious reasons. When they found the silver, it wasn't long after they started building up towns and mills and a smelter, and I mean, you know, this place just turned into, you know, kind of a silver city. They ended up mining just millions of ounces of silver. The mining lasted from the 1800s all the way into the 1900s, and this area is not exhausted to this day. And they were taking out, I think in the 80s, 90s, they were taking out like millions of tons of silver every year. And then associated metals with that, they did have gold that came out, but gold was considered a byproduct. So they were taking like probably 500,000 ounces of gold as a byproduct of the more desirable silver mining. They also took out things like zinc and lead. Lead was another big metal that came along for the ride. So they had a lot of lead that they found here. Actually, Galena is the main ore for lead. It's a lead sulfide. It's really cool because it actually looks like little, kind of like little cubic, shiny metal, shiny metallic crystals. So I find that to be one of my favorite minerals, actually. It's just really cool. But yeah, let's get to the pristine part. So obviously mining isn't typically good for the environment, of course, so that's a no-brainer. But since this was such a big operation, there are a lot of issues that came along with it. And this area is now designated a Superfund. Well, in the area, there's a Superfund site. I think it's like 45 miles of the valley, and the big portion of a watershed around here is considered a Superfund site. If you don't know what Superfund sites are, I highly recommend looking up Superfund sites. You can go to the epa.gov/Superfund. These are sites that the EPA has declared is pretty much toxic, hazardous sites that need to be cleaned up, and so a certain designation of money and time and efforts go into the cleanup. There's quite a bit of them around the country. There might be some in your area. If you go to the EPA site, you can actually search. I think there used to be a map on there that you can search regions and see where these all are. There's some really interesting ones, goes back into history, that we had some crazy stuff going on. Radioactivity, radioactive waste, a lot of stuff associated with mining, tailings, and chemical companies that have done some stuff maybe they shouldn't have done. And now we have cleanup efforts for that as well. Actually, if you read environmental and ecological historical text, a lot of them will touch on these sites. And I believe probably Love Canal in New York was one of the early ones. Interesting, enlightening, maybe disturbing stuff to read about, but it's good to learn. So if you haven't checked that out, check them out. So that's what this area has now. There's contaminated soil, because they had a smelter here too, right? So they're pumping basic toxic metals into the air. It's in the soil. It was used in like construction of the roads and stuff like that. So it kind of got all over the place. And the water was heavily contaminated.
So all of these waters feed into a large body of water in the area known as Lake Coeur dAlene, and this is actually now a popular tourist destination, but that lake is heavily contaminated with all of the runoff. The floodplain was covered with about 100 million tons of this contaminated sediment. It's even been referred to as the killing fields because of waterfowl that die there. In fact, tundra swans are known to migrate in the area, and it actually essentially paralyzes them so that they starve to death.
They detected lead in the children's blood around here. So there's huge cleanup efforts. There was a big project. And the idea for the project was actually to take scattered mine tailings and move them, kind of consolidate them to one area. Not a total resolve, but I mean, I guess it's an effort. Maybe it would keep some of it out of the water. Although there's water around there, I think, too, where they're consolidating it. So I don't know how well that's going to work. As usual, a lot of these things end up being short-term solutions. Apparently, some of the hillsides, vegetation wouldn't even take on because it couldn't with all the contamination. So there were unvegetated hillsides that are now also being reclaimed. They are swapping soil in people's yards as part of reclamation. Just huge effort.
But aside from the environmental ramifications, the area actually faced a lot of trouble, even dating back to the start of the mining in this district.
You might have heard, if you follow any of the history and mining history, of the Sunshine Mine disaster. That was a big event, I think in 1972. The mine shafts are pretty insane here. They go, some of them are like 6,000-7,000 deep. Some of them are some of the deepest mine shafts in the world. The Sunshine Mine was a big boy here. They had a fire. I couldn't find anything that says what started the fire. They think maybe just some rubbish, maybe a cigarette or something. Ignited trash. And they had a fire that started in their hard rock mine, silver mine. And a lot of them were pretty surprised by this because they didn't really expect a fire. But it was exacerbated by the fact that they were spraying polyurethane foam in I think the old mining areas where they were capping off some of those old mining channels with this stuff. So they were using that in the mine shafts. And for whatever reason, they didn't think that this stuff would be a fire hazard or a hazard in the mine. That turned into a whole lawsuit and everything with the Dow chemical company, who I think manufactured that. You can look all that up. More interesting stuff that comes from our Dow DuPont products. One thing led to another. They had a fire. They were, trapped down there, consumed by smoke and carbon monoxide, and a little under 100 people died from it. Crazy working in the mine. I don't know. I don't think it would be as much as I love rocks. I wouldn't want to be down there. It's a little claustrophobic.
In addition to accidents like that, there were also catastrophes caused by disgruntled union miners who resorted to basically blowing up the mills and mine infrastructure to try to protest things like wages or conditions in the mine. And in fact, at least twice there was martial law installed and federal troops came in to restore order.
There were like hundreds and hundreds of mines. Most of them closed down. I think just a couple major operations still exist today for the more profitable stuff. We are expected into the future to continue to have, profitable mining efforts, or at least lucrative mining efforts. Profit's a whole nother story. Lucrative mining efforts into, I don't know, probably a decade or so. I don't know. They have a huge ore body here. So they have the possibility, depending on the price of the metals and stuff like that. Like I said, fascinating, enlightening, and disturbing all in the same time. That's it for today from North Idaho. Thank you guys for being here, and I will see you next time. Bye.